A few hours after my father's funeral, my mother married her new partner and moved her new family into the house I had inherited. She told me that from now on, he would take over my father's bakery business. When I confronted her about it, she snapped, "This house and bakery are mine now, so you can stay here until our honeymoon trip." I couldn't help but laugh, as just days earlier, my world had been turned upside down. My name is Alex Thompson, and I'm 26 years old. I recently graduated from the University of Southern California with a degree in graphic design. Life as a fresh graduate comes with its challenges, but my story is more than just about navigating adulthood. It's about family legacy, betrayal, and finding strength in the face of adversity. Growing up, my father, Robert Thompson, was the cornerstone of my world. A talented chef and business owner, he wasn't just an incredible cook but also a meticulous planner. He built his life with purpose, ensuring that I always had a safety net, even before his cancer diagnosis. Among his most prized possessions was the family bakery he had built from scratch, pouring his heart and soul into its success. When he passed away 4 years ago, he left the business to me, hoping I would have something to hold on to, a part of him that would always remain. "Alex, this bakery is more than just a business," he would say. "It's our home, our roots. You'll always have a place to call yours." Even while battling cancer, his focus remained on preparing me for a future without him. He made sure I understood every detail of the business, from managing staff to dealing with suppliers. His foresight was his way of showing love, and I carried that with me every day. Life wasn't always simple, though. My parents' marriage lasted 12 years before everything fell apart. I was just a child when my mother, Sarah Thompson, decided to leave us for someone else. There were no dramatic fights or courtroom battles, just quiet goodbyes. She moved on quickly, marrying David, a younger man who seemed to step into the role of husband and father without hesitation. Their daughter, Lily, came shortly after, and though I visited occasionally, I never felt like I truly belonged in their new family. David was always polite but distant, the kind of stepfather who made you feel like a guest rather than part of the household. "Alex, would you like to stay for dinner?" he'd ask, his tone suggesting he hoped I'd say no. Meanwhile, my mom worked long hours, claiming she needed to provide for her family, a category that seemed to exclude me more often than not. Lily, my half-sister, was 8 years younger and the apple of their eye. I'd see David fussing over her, styling her hair or applauding her every little accomplishment. It was hard not to feel like an outsider. Despite all this, my relationship with my mother remained cordial, though distant. She paid for my college education in a lump sum, perhaps out of guilt or obligation. It was her way of staying involved without actually being present. I accepted it without question because, at the time, I thought it was the best I could hope for. Little did I know that my father's thoughtful plans and my mother's hidden motives would set the stage for a storm I never saw coming. Losing my father was the hardest thing I've ever faced. Robert Thompson wasn't just my dad, he was my anchor, my cheerleader, and the person who made me feel like I could take on the world. When he passed away from cancer 4 years ago, just weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, my world crumbled. The grief was overwhelming, it felt like a piece of me was missing, and for a long time, I struggled to even get out of bed. During those first few weeks, I was numb, barely able to process the fact that he was gone. That's when my mother, Sarah Thompson, stepped in, offering help in a way I hadn't expected. She, along with David and Lily, temporarily moved into the house to support me. At the time, I was too overwhelmed by my loss to question it. I was just grateful for the presence of people, even if our relationship had always been strained. "We're here for you, Alex," my mom said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. David nodded in agreement, his face carefully arranged to look sympathetic. Even Lily seemed to go out of her way to be kind, though her curious eyes wandered through the house, taking in every corner like it was a museum. At first, their presence brought some relief. David took charge of organizing meals and keeping the house running, while my mom helped with the overwhelming paperwork that comes with losing a loved one. Lily would sit with me, chatting about school and her friends, offering small distractions from the crushing weight of my grief. It felt strange, but in those moments, almost comforting. As summer drew to a close and my college start date dining table was still there, but it had been moved to a different spot, and the new decor felt foreign, blending with the warmth my dad had cultivated. It felt like we were all building something together, something that honored the past while embracing the present. By the time I graduated, I genuinely believed we had created a strange but functional family dynamic. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I never imagined how fragile it all was, how quickly the foundation we built could crack under the weight of hidden truths. Graduating from college felt like the start of a new chapter in my life. After 4 years of hard work, late-night study sessions, and dreaming about my future, I finally had my degree in hand. I had landed a job at a local firm back in my hometown, and the thought of returning to the house I had grown up in filled me with a sense of comfort and excitement. My father's house, my house, was waiting for me, a place where I could finally settle down and start building my career. The June afternoon I arrived back home was bright and warm, the kind of day that fills you with optimism. As the taxi pulled up to the driveway, I smiled at the familiar sight of the house. The garden looked well maintained, though the roses my dad had planted seemed slightly different from how he tended them. The house felt the same yet subtly altered by the small changes David had made over the years: new curtains, a different paint color on the shutters. It all looked welcoming, and I couldn't wait to step inside and claim my room once again. Dragging my suitcases up the front walk, I reached for my keys, eager to walk into the home that had always been a safe haven for me. But when I slid the key into the lock, it wouldn't turn. Frowning, I tried again, jiggling the key slightly. Still nothing. Confused, I muttered to myself, "What the hell," and knocked loudly on the door. Surely it was just a mistake, a new lock installed without anyone thinking to send me a spare key. After a moment, the door opened, and David stood there, his expression shifting from surprise to discomfort in an instant. He was wearing an apron dusted with flour, as if he had been baking. "Alex," he said, his voice hesitant. "What are you doing here?" I wheeled my suitcase into the entryway, ignoring the awkwardness in his tone. "What do you mean?" "I live here," I replied, scanning the living room, which looked subtly different from how I had left it: new furniture arrangements, a different rug. "Why were the locks changed?" Before David could answer, my mom appeared from the living room, her face pale and her movements stiff. Lily trailed behind her, looking nervous but staying silent. "Alex," Mom began, rubbing the back of her neck, a telltale sign she was uncomfortable. "Let's talk in the office for a minute." Alarm bells started ringing in my head as I followed her to the small office that used to belong to my dad. The walls were still lined with his books and certificates, but the air felt heavy, as if the room itself knew what was coming. Mom closed the door behind us and turned to face me, her hand shaking slightly. "Alex," she started, her voice low, "there's something I need to tell you." She paused, and I could see the weight of her words pressing down on her. "David thinks this house belongs to me." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "What are you talking about?" "Dad left this house to me, it's in his will." She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "I know that, but when we moved in, I told David it was mine, that I'd given it to your dad out of kindness after the divorce, and that when he passed, it came back to me." The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. "You lied to him for 4 years? You let him believe this was your house, and now you're telling me that he doesn't even know it's mine?" Mom's shoulders slumped. "I didn't think it would matter. You were at college, and we needed a place to stay. I thought it would be temporary." Anger and disbelief surged through me. "Temporary? This is my house, Mom. Dad's house. And you're telling me you've been living here, letting David act like it's his while you lie to him and to me?" "I was going to tell him the truth," she said weakly, but her words rang hollow. "Just give me some time to figure out how to handle this." I shook my head, furious. "You've already had 4 years, Mom." At that moment, David knocked on the door, his voice sharp. "Is everything okay in there?" The tension was suffocating, but one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let them continue the charade. The first few days back in favorite vase had been moved to a dusty corner shelf. It didn't match the new aesthetic, David said when I confronted him. My frustration grew, but I tried to hold my tongue, knowing any argument would only make things worse. The tension in the house was unbearable. David made it clear I wasn't welcome, and Lily followed his lead, treating me with disdain. Even my mom, who had always been my safety net, seemed distant. She avoided eye contact and often left the house early in the morning, claiming work obligations. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. Family dinners became a battlefield of subtle digs and uncomfortable silences. David would cook just enough food for 3 people, then feign surprise when I joined them at the table. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be here for dinner," he'd say, his tone light but his eyes cold. Lily giggled at her father's remarks, and my mom would sit quietly, avoiding any confrontation. As the days passed, the isolation began to wear on me. I found myself retreating to my room more often, avoiding the hostility that seemed to follow me around the house. But even there, I couldn't escape the suffocating sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about David anymore, it was about my mother, the woman who had stood by silently as her husband chipped away at my sense of belonging. I tried to focus on my new job and reconnecting with old friends to distract myself, but the weight of the tension at home lingered. Each day, the cracks in our fragile family dynamic grew deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed out of my own life. Saturday morning started unusually quiet. No sounds of David's weekend baking in the kitchen, no music blasting from Lily's room, and no faint murmurs of the TV where my mom usually watched sports. The silence was eerie, like the house itself was holding its breath. I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs, calling out, "Hello? David?" "Mom," but there was no response. The kitchen was spotless, not just clean but unused since the night before. The living room looked untouched, with throw pillows perfectly arranged on the couch. Even the usual clutter by the entryway, Lily's shoes, David's messenger bag, was gone. A quick glance outside confirmed it. My mom's car wasn't in the driveway. I checked my phone, expecting a note or text explaining their absence, but there was nothing. Confused, I dialed my mom's number. It went straight to voicemail. Frowning, I tried a few more times before reluctantly calling David. He picked up on the 4th ring, his voice sharp and impatient. "What do you want, Alex?" he snapped, the sound of waves and tropical music playing faintly in the background. "I just wanted to know where everyone is," I said, caught off guard by his tone. I woke up, and the house was empty. He laughed, but it wasn't the warm kind of laugh, it was mean, cutting. "Oh, didn't we tell you? We're in the Maldives, first-class flights, luxury resort, the works." His voice dripped with mockery. "We didn't mention it because, frankly, we didn't want you tagging along and expecting us to pay for you." "What?" I stammered, disbelief mixing with anger. "David, what are you talking about? You left without saying anything." "Save it," he interrupted coldly. "I'm done with this whole situation. You're nothing but a freeloader living in our house, mooching off us like you own the place. Your mother might tolerate it, but I won't. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a grown man squatting in our home?" His words hit like a slap, but he wasn't finished. "When we get back, I want you gone. Pack your things and leave, Alex. And don't think you can guilt your mother into letting you stay. She agrees with me, she's just too spineless to tell you herself. We've already blocked your number. Have a nice life." The line went dead before I could respond. For a moment, I just stood there, the phone trembling in my hand. His venomous words echoed in my mind, and the weight of the betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. But then something inside me shifted. The sadness and disbelief gave way to anger, white-hot, focused anger. This was my house, my father's house, and I was done playing nice. I spent the rest of the day packing their belongings with a determination I didn't know I had. David's expensive clothes, Lily's school supplies, my mom's golf clubs, it all went into boxes and suitcases. I stacked them neatly in the garage, making sure not a single trace of them remained in the house. Every move felt cathartic, like I was reclaiming and no one was going to take it from me. Friday evening, I pulled into the driveway after a long day at work and immediately spotted their car. They were back. David, my mom, and Lily stood near the front steps, surrounded by their suitcases and boxes from the garage. David's face was flushed with fury, his hands gesturing wildly as he spoke to my mom. Lily hung back, scowling, while my mom wore her usual look of quiet discomfort. As soon as I stepped out of my car, David's voice erupted. "How dare you change the locks," he shouted, storming toward me. "This is our house. You have no right to lock us out. I ignored his ranting, walking calmly past them toward the front door. David followed close behind, his voice rising with every step. This is breaking and entering. We're calling the police. You think you can just throw us out like we're nothings? I stopped at the door, turned, and faced him. Something inside me felt calm and steady, even as his words spat like venom. No, David, I said firmly. This isn't your house. It never was. This house belongs to me. My father left it to me in his will. The only reason you've been living here is because I allowed it, and now I'm done. His face twisted in disbelief as he turned to my mom, who stood frozen near the car. Jackie, tell him he's lying. Tell him this is our house, he demanded, his voice shrill. My mom looked like she wanted to melt into the pavement. She avoided my gaze as she shuffled uncomfortably, finally mumbling, he's telling the truth. David's fury boiled over. You lied to me, he shrieked, glaring at her. You let me think this was your house, that you were doing us a favor by letting him stay. What else haven't you told me? His attention snapped back to me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Ethan, sweetheart, he began, his tone suddenly soft and saccharine, we've had so many good times here, holiday dinners, book club nights. This is a family home. Surely we can work something out. No, I said, cutting him off. We can't. Your things are in the garage. Take them and leave. David's mask cracked, his tone turning venomous again. You ungrateful little, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. You'd throw your own family out on the streets? You've never treated me like family, I shot back, my voice calm but firm. And don't pretend this is about loyalty. You tried to steal my house, my father's house. My mom finally stepped forward, her voice trembling. Ethan, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we're family. We can figure this out. Just let us stay a little longer. I shook my head, meeting her pleading eyes with steel. No, Mom. You lied to him and you lied to me. You let him erase every trace of Dad from this house while you stood by and said nothing. I won't let you keep doing this. David tried one last time, his voice rising with desperation. You can't do this. We'll fight you on this. I opened the door and stepped inside, turning to face them one last time. You're welcome to try, I said simply, closing the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched them argue as they loaded the last of their belongings into the car. David screamed, Lily cried, and my mom just looked defeated. As the car pulled away, a heavy weight lifted from my chest. The house was mine again, truly mine. In the days following their departure, the house felt eerily quiet, but the silence brought a surprising sense of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or bracing for David's passive-aggressive remarks. The space was mine again, and with it came a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. This was no longer just my father's house, it was my sanctuary, my chance to start fresh. Cutting ties with my mother and her family wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Mom tried to reach out a few times, calling from new numbers and leaving voicemails full of apologies and promises to fix things. I didn't answer, her words felt hollow after everything she had allowed to happen. I love you, Ethan, she said in one message. I was just trying to keep the peace. But peace built on lies isn't peace at all, and I wasn't willing to compromise my dignity for her comfort anymore. David didn't bother trying to reach me, he'd made his feelings clear. Lily's silence stung more than I expected, but I reminded myself that she was still young, caught in the crossfire